Okay, here we go again. So today we're going to be talking about what a technical designer is. This is the role that I am striving to have in the game industry because I think technical design or helping bridge gaps between programming and design is a really interesting challenge, and I want to do that. So I briefly sort of just said what technical design is, or what their job is. A technical designer's job is to bridge the gap between a designer team and a programmer team. This designer team can be any facet of design: narrative, game, quest, open world, whatever. What does it mean to bridge the gap? So what essentially that means is I need to understand within my own area. So if I'm working within game design, I need to understand what in game design is like what common issues there are. Narrative design, quest design, all that stuff. I need to understand the designers I'm working with so I can better anticipate the problems that they're going to have. Once I'm able to anticipate those problems, I can then go to programming and ask them to make tools for us. I myself would be QAing those tools and sort of UX testing them, which basically just means I'm making sure they're usable. This isn't always the case though. Bridging the gap of understanding your design team is always going to be there. But for some designers, you're more often than not the programmer who's also making the tools, which means even though in this article they say that a programming background is optional, at bigger studios maybe, because at bigger studios they can afford someone who's literally just an intermediary. But at smaller studios, you kind of got to be able to anticipate problems and also solve them yourself. So now that we know what they are, what are some responsibilities? So one main one that interested me here was so the overall task of a technical designer is to reduce the technical friction for designers. That means my goal is to make it as easy as possible for designers to make content by making sure they have tools in place in order to make the making of content smooth and easy. There's a similar field called a tech artist, which they work more with modelers, VFX artists, riggers, stuff like that. And their job is the same. They make tools and construct pipelines, which are basically just workflows or how things files are moved from one thing to the other. That's what a pipeline is. How files are moved from one thing to another. Pipelines scale pretty insane. So you could have like a really small pipeline within just the 3D modeling department, but then also the entire studio has a pipeline of every different department, right? So a typical studio pipeline would be programming at the front. That means whatever we're doing, program starts, and then design, and then usually art. That's pretty general, and there's a ton of stuff in between there that I don't know a whole lot about. But this was how it was explained to me by a producer, and that's how I think about pipelines. Anyways, that was an entirely separate thing, but yeah, I need to, for designers, make their workflows or their pipelines as easy as possible to work with. Um, Another thing is I need to understand the game design and creative direction of the project to be able to anticipate the needs of designers. So this is sort of what I already talked on, where it's like I need to be able to understand what's going to be happening later in the project. If we're working on getting the groundwork for combat set up, I should probably be thinking about, okay, so how can we make combat easier for the designers to set up? Because the more time the less time designers spend setting combat up, the more time they have to play test it and figure out what works and what doesn't work. So now that we know like what the responsibilities are, generally who is a tech designer? So a tech designer is either a designer that has a strong affinity for tools technical skills, and a good understanding of technical challenges within their department. That was what I was talking about earlier, department being each facet of design. Or they are a programmer with an affinity for design and they are able to understand the needs of designers. If we were looking at just these two categories, I would probably follow into a designer that has a strong affinity for tools or technical skills. I'm not great with hard code, but I am working on both learning it and also I'm pretty good with some scripting languages such as Blueprints, so I could probably do things. So technical design skills. This is just a list of skills that would be good for a technical designer to have. Strong analytical skills, the ability to summarize complex topics, be a great pedagogue. I figured out that word just means a strict or pedantic teacher. Create technical documentation for the team. Documentation is always important, but especially when you're making something technical or using something technical, if it has multiple steps, those steps need to be clearly laid out for designers, because the less time they have to spend asking questions about what to do, the more time they get to do doing the do. Outside of that, curious and technology intelligent, and then being pragmatic. I don't know what pragmatic means. I should have looked that up, but I don't know. Regardless, that was today's article, and we're at 6 minutes this time, so we're getting lower.